If you want to be a successful investor, you need to know how to read financial statements, as they are the best way of understanding a company's past, present, and potential future financial situation, so that you can make sure that you are only buying the stocks of the best quality companies out there. And that's why I've created a series about reading financial statements. Now this video is going to be part 1 of a 3-part series about the basics of reading financial statements. This first video will go over how to read the income statement using Apple's 10K as an example. And the other 2 are going to be about reading the balance sheet and the cash flow statement. So if you're interested in learning more, stay tuned. An income statement is one of the most important financial statements that companies produce. It provides a snapshot of a company's profitability over a period of time, usually a quarter or a year. In this tutorial, we'll cover what an income statement is and what it includes and how to read it. An income statement, also known as a profit and loss statement, is a financial statement that shows a company's revenue, expenses, and net income over a specific period of time. It provides insight into a company's profitability and its ability to generate revenue. There are several key components of an income statement that you should be familiar with. These include revenue, cost of goods sold, gross profit, operating expenses, operating income, other income and expenses, and the net income. The revenue is the total amount of money a company earns from its sales of goods and services during the period covered by the income statement. In Apple's case, revenue includes sales of iPhones, iPads, Macs, and other products, as well as services like Apple Music and the App Store. Cost of goods sold is the direct cost of producing or acquiring the goods that a company sells during the period covered by the income statement. For Apple, this would include the cost of producing iPhones, iPads, and Macs, as well as the cost of acquiring content for Apple Music and for the App Store. The gross profit is the revenue minus the cost of goods sold. It represents the profit a company makes from selling its products and services before deducting operating expenses. The operating expenses are the indirect costs of running a business, such as salaries, rent, marketing, and research and development. In Apple's case, operating expenses would include the salaries of its employees, the cost of its retail stores, and the money it spends on advertising. The operating income is the gross profit minus the operating expenses. It represents the profit that a company makes from its operations before taking into account other income and expenses. The other income and expenses are the non-operating items that affect a company's bottom line. They can include things like interest, income, investment gains or losses, and taxes. In Apple's case, other income and expenses would include things like interest income from its cash reserves and the taxes they paid. The net income is the bottom line of the income statement, representing the profit a company makes after all expenses have been deducted. It's the amount of money that's available for distribution to shareholders as dividends or for reinvestment into the business. Now that you understand the components of an income statement, let's take a look at how to read Apple's income statement for the fiscal year of 2022. First, let's take a look at the revenue section. Apple's total revenue for 2022 was $394 billion, up from $365 billion in 2021. This is a significant increase, which is largely due to the popularity of the new iPhone 13 and the growth of Apple's service business. Next, let's take a look at the cost of goods sold. Apple's cost of goods sold for 2022 was $223 billion, up from 213 in 2021. This increase is largely due to the higher cost of components for iPhones, as well as the higher content cost for the service business. Now let's take a look at the gross profit section. Apple's gross profit for 2022 was $170 billion, up from $152 billion in 2021. This represents the profit that Apple made from selling its products and services before deducting the operating expenses. Moving on to the operating expenses. We can see that Apple's total operating expenses for 2022 were $51 billion, up from $43 billion in 2021. This increase was largely due to higher research and development expenses, as well as higher selling, general, and administrative expenses. After deducting the operating expenses from the gross profit, we've arrived at the operating income section. Apple's operating income for 2022 was $119 billion, up from $108 billion in 2021. This represents the profit that Apple has made from its operations before taking into account other income and expenses. In the other income and expenses section, we can see that Apple's interest income for 2022 was negative $334 million. Apple's income taxes for 2022 were $19 billion, up from $14 billion in 2021. This increase was due to higher earnings in foreign jurisdictions, which are subject to higher taxes. Finally, we arrive at the net income section. Apple's net income for 2022 was $99 billion, up from $94 billion in 2021. This represents the profit that Apple has made after all expenses have been deducted. This amount is available for distribution to shareholders as well as for reinvestment in the business. In conclusion, understanding how to read an income statement is essential for anyone who wants to analyze a company's financial performance. By looking at each component of the income statement, you can get a better understanding of a company's revenue, expenses, and profitability. Using Apple's 10K as an example, we can see that Apple has had a strong financial performance in 2022, largely due to the success of the iPhone 13 and the growth of its service business. I would like to thank everyone for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.